Picture this: a woman is serving 14 years in prison. Her crime: writing on a statue with lipstick. Right now, over 1,000 people are locked up in Brazil, not for murder, not for robbery, but for being in the wrong place at the wrong time on January 8th, 2023. What I'm about to show you will make you question everything you think you know about justice. And the international media, they're not telling you any of this. January 8th, 2023, a Sunday when government buildings in Brazil's capital stood nearly empty. What started as thousands of Brazilians singing their national anthem and marching peacefully through Brasilia at 1 p.m. would spiral into chaos by 4 p.m. Protesters stormed Brazil's Congress, the Supreme Court, and the presidential palace. Historic furniture destroyed, windows smashed, artwork vandalized. The images were shocking and undeniable. But here's where this story takes a dark and chilling turn. Supreme Court Justice Alexander de Moraes ordered the immediate mass arrest of everyone who was in Brasilia that day. Over 1,500 people were detained by federal police, taken to a makeshift gymnasium, and forced to sign confessions of guilt before being shipped to prison. What happened next defies logic, justice, and basic human decency. Of those 1,500 arrested, only a small fraction were actually caught inside government buildings committing crimes. The majority, they were arrested the next day while peacefully protesting outside army barracks, miles away from any vandalism. Over time, some were released, mainly elderly people, mothers with children, sick individuals, and even homeless people. Others got electronic ankle monitors, social media bans, and house arrest. But after a month, 900 were still behind bars. Then came the bombshell. Brazil's intelligence agency had issued 33 official warnings between January 2nd and 8th, alerting authorities about the risk of building invasions. The federal police's explanation for not acting: simple: coordination failure and information flow problems. It gets worse. On the morning of January 8th, the intelligence agency's deputy director called General Gonçalves Dias, head of the GSI, the agency responsible for protecting the president and coordinating crisis responses. The general's response: he said the protesters would have problems. But he didn't mobilize troops, didn't reinforce security, didn't activate crisis protocols, despite receiving 11 alerts the day before. The result: security was intentionally reduced, paving the way for what unfolded. Leaked messages between intelligence agents revealed they knew people were going to come down and vandalize, and that there was facilitation of access to areas where weapons were stored. The most scandalous proof: General Gonçalves Dias was filmed walking calmly among the invaders, phone in hand, chatting with them like a security guard making his rounds. Yes, the man responsible for protecting government buildings acted like a casual observer while democracy was supposedly under attack. Oh, and the security camera footage. It took weeks to surface. Why? Of the 185 cameras in the Justice Palace, federal police only provided images from 4. Their justification: images are automatically deleted after 15 to 30 days per contract. Right. The gravest attack on democracy in Brazilian history, and most of the evidence vanished due to a contractual clause. Despite all these red flags, President Lula's government, the Supreme Court, and traditional media still insist this was an attempted coup. More than 2 years later, here are the staggering numbers. 1,624 people charged, 540 made plea deals, admitting guilt in exchange for fines. Democracy courses and community service: 523, already convicted 271, sentenced to up to 3 years 252, sentenced to between 11 and 17.5 years. 8 acquitted, 84 still imprisoned, 61 fugitives, 6 died during the process, 1,087 still awaiting trial. The charges: armed criminal association, violent abolition of the democratic rule of law, attempted coup, qualified damage, and deterioration of public patrimony. Now I ask you, do you really believe these people, unarmed, elderly, mothers, sick people, out-of-shape individuals, were capable of overthrowing Brazil's armed forces? Do you think 1,500 unarmed protesters could defeat 212,000 armed soldiers? There were children in the crowd. What kind of coup brings children, elderly, and sick people to overthrow a government? But for the Brazilian government, this was the greatest threat to democracy in history. The truth is, Brasilia has always been the stage for violent protests, and worse, with total impunity, especially when the perpetrators were left-wing. Look at this. 2006, landless workers movement invades Congress, property destroyed. Arrests, none. 2013, Molotov cocktails and graffiti at the Foreign Ministry. Arrests, none. 2014, rural workers' movement invades public buildings, injures 22 police officers. Arrests, none. 2017, invasions and fires in ministries. Permanent arrests, none. All these movements were left-wing, linked to parties like the PT, which happens to be Brazil's current president's party, and SAL. The media called them protesters. January 8th participants are terrorists, coup plotters, fascists, anti-democrats. Why? But more outrageous than the sentences are the process illegalities. Mass arrests without individual analysis, everyone being judged by the highest court, which should only try political authorities or those in public office. The same court acting as investigator, prosecutor, and judge denial of bail, even when prosecutors recommended release elderly, sick, and vulnerable mothers kept in prison. Lawyers denied access to evidence for their own clients, complete lack of transparency. Everything under judicial secrecy, copy and paste decisions, without individual analysis. Supreme Court opening investigations directly, without legal basis. And the worst part, Alexander de Moraes is the rapporteur, investigator, prosecutor, judge, and victim. The same man who claims to have been the target of an assassination attempt is judging the supposed perpetrators. This is prohibited. A judge cannot be part of the process. There's a principle called impartiality for exactly this reason. But apparently in this case, the law means nothing. Now I'll tell you the cases that hurt the most, that expose the authoritarianism and injustice against January 8th defendants. Geraldo Felipe da Silva, homeless, imprisoned for 320 days. Accused of vandalizing a police car, but his crime being in 3 Powers Plaza without evidence. Prosecutors only requested acquittal in May 2023. Jean de Brito da Silva, garbage collector, autistic, intellectually disabled, functionally illiterate. Arrested at the military camp without understanding what was happening. Released with ankle monitor. Acquitted only in March 2024 with the absurd condition of psychological monitoring for 2 years. Jean Guimarães dos Santos sold candy at traffic lights and went to the camp looking for food. Ended up in preventive detention for over a year, accused of criminal association. Acquitted only in January 2025. These people had no coup plan, weren't armed, had no money, nor full awareness of what was happening. And still they were persecuted, imprisoned, criminalized. Deborah Rodrigues dos Santos, hairdresser, mother of 2, convicted for writing "You lost, loser" with lipstick on a statue called Justice. That's right, with lipstick. No video of her breaking, vandalizing, or destroying anything, just that. The phrase she wrote is the same that Justice Barroso publicly said to a protester in New York in 2022. Deborah was arrested in March 2023. She wrote a letter asking forgiveness from Alexander de Moraes, became a defendant only in August 2024, and was sentenced in April 2025 to 14 years in prison. 14, for lipstick, for a phrase, for an image. Clariston Pereira da Cunha, Big Cles, a 46-year-old businessman from Bahia, arrested inside Congress. He had vasculitis and took controlled medications. Prosecutors requested his transfer to house arrest. Moraes ignored it. Clariston died in prison on November 20, 2023 during outdoor time, sudden illness. This happened 13 days after an urgent medical request sent to the Supreme Court, which was simply filed away. Before dying, he reported going 17 days without adequate food, fainting from lack of air, and urinating on himself during transport. His family reported torture to the OAS. Nothing happened, and if you think it stops there, there's more. Vildite Ferreira da Silva Guardia, 74 years old. Irasai Megum Negoshi, 72. 2 ladies convicted for participating in the acts. Being elderly, they received house arrest. But the Supreme Court alleged they violated rules like not using social media, not leaving home without authorization, not wearing ankle monitors. Result: Moraes sent both back to jail, even with comorbidities, mobility difficulties, and advanced age. Now these women, called terrorists, serve sentences of up to 14 years. Meanwhile, real criminals, perpetrators of atrocities, often aren't even arrested. Some are released the same day. Others are treated as victims of society. I still haven't explained why these people were in front of barracks and in 3 Powers Plaza. The answer: elections. But it's not just that. They weren't protesting just against the 2022 results, but against the entire process. Brazilian elections are controlled by the Electoral Court, which organizes, oversees, judges, creates rules, decides who can be a candidate, what can be said in campaigns, What is fake news and who should be censored? Yes, all this power concentrated in a single court without real external control. And worse, electoral court judges aren't elected by the people. They're appointed by other courts and by the president, who might be running for re-election that year. The 2022 election was especially controversial due to direct interference from the Electoral Court and persecution of Jair Bolsonaro, the then president who defended changes to the voting system that millions of Brazilians already distrusted. Blocking profiles and content on social media under the pretext of combating disinformation, Northeast radio scandal. Bolsonaro's campaign denounced that thousands of mandatory insertions weren't aired. Prior censorship of the documentary, who ordered Jair Bolsonaro's murder, prohibition of associating Lula with Ortega and Maduro, despite clear photos, videos, and statements of friendship and support. Lula was in prison. Yes, Brazil's current president was serving time for corruption and money laundering. His convictions were annulled on procedural grounds. He recovered political rights and ran again. For millions of Brazilians, this wasn't coincidence. They believed the system knew only Lula could defeat Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro himself became a defendant in January 8th investigations, accused of being the intellectual author. The main evidence, a video posted on social media and deleted shortly after. They recovered the video and now treat it as criminal evidence. This is the context in which January 8th happened. A suffocated country, an exhausted population, voiceless before Brazilian justice. This doesn't justify invading buildings, breaking property, or acting violently. Not everyone in Three Powers Plaza was innocent. There could have been infiltrators and ill-intentioned people. But what needs to be said clearly is, there was no coup. Thousands of people who didn't commit violent acts are being persecuted and unjustly imprisoned. The Brazilian system is treating protesters as terrorists, and justice has become a political weapon. What happened was the desperate cry of a population. Many Brazilians are tired of this system. Tired of seeing the same political, judicial, and media elites controlling the country like parasites, sucking every drop of blood from their victims while pretending to be Democrats. I don't even believe democracy is the best system. I don't support any party, politician, or group, but I have eyes, I have consciousness, and seeing injustice bothers me to the point where I can't stay silent. That's why I share all this, not for fame or interest, but in hope that by exposing these truths to the world, unjustly convicted people might one day get their lives back. Because what we're living in Brazil isn't freedom. It's an increasingly authoritarian, frightening, and obscure regime. And in the end, what most people want, and it would be a lot, is peace, autonomy, and freedom to live without fear.